Hallo. I will start today with a really fun tongue twister of German. And it's about flies. Wenn Fliegen hinter Fliegen fliegen, 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 fliegen nach. Let's try it together. Wenn Fliegen hinter Fliegen fliegen, 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 fliegen nach. It sounds like I'm repeating the same word over and over again, right? Well, almost, except that there are nouns and verbs and some cool grammar in this sentence. See for yourself. It says, when flies fly behind flies, flies are following flies. To after fly, nachfliegen is to follow, but by flight. As usually in German, the prefix nach separates from the main verb and goes, or flies, to the end of the clause, which is how you end up, quite naturally, with 6 fliegen in a row. But why am I mentioning this today? Because A, tongue twisters are great for practicing your pronunciation. And B, the first clause in this tongue twister is a dependent clause that starts with a subordinating conjunction wenn, when, which kicks the conjugated verb to the end of the clause. And that's something we're going to learn today. If you want, the literal translation of the tongue twister is when flies after flies fly, fly flies, flies after. So we're going to talk about the word order and dependent clauses. As always, before learning something new, we need to make sure you remember the rules we had so far. The first word order rule we had was, in German statements, the verb is always second. Now let's try to make a sentence out of the given elements. Here they are, not in order. Wandert gern am Wochenende in den Bergen. Do you know the meanings of all these words? Wandert, hikes. Gern, with pleasure. Am Wochenende, on the weekend. And in den Bergen, in the mountains. Let's take the verb and put it in the right position. It is my choice now what I want to put first. And I choose am Wochenende. So my time element now starts the sentence. But it's not the subject of a sentence. And since it's not, I need to make sure the subject comes immediately after the verb. The subject here is he, because he is the one who hikes, so it takes the third position. Now, I have 2 elements left, gern and in den Bergen. Whenever I have to decide what the order of the remaining elements is, I always consider the order wann, wie, wo, or time, manner, place. So, as you see, place is typically last. It will take the last position, where gern, how, with pleasure, will be in the 4th position. Of course, I'm free to start my sentence with any other element, and let's try changing it up a bit. Keep in mind that regardless of what I decide to put first, my verb is always second. If I want to start with all other elements will go after the verb. Wandert am Wochenende gern in den Bergen. And if I wanted to start with in den Bergen, then needs to go immediately after the verb, since nothing is more important than the subject of a sentence. And then let the other elements finish the sentence. In den Bergen wandert gern am Wochenende. Now, what about questions? There are 2 types of questions, as you remember. W questions and yes or no questions. In W questions, same rule applies. Verb goes second, immediately after the question word, whereas in yes or no questions, the verb goes first. Let's see a few examples. Wann kommst du morgen? Wie heißt deine Freundin? Was wollt ihr heute essen? Warum sind Sie so müde? And now the yes or no questions. Kommst du morgen? Heißt deine Freundin Lena? Wollt ihr essen? Sind Sie müde? As you see, the verb always appears in the same position. Now, do you remember what happens to verb complements and verbs with separable prefixes? They go last. Consider this sentence. Maria spielt nicht sehr oft Tennis. Here, the word tennis functions like a verb complement as it completes the idea of playing. In a standard sentence, such verb additions or complements go last and form a frame around all other elements in the sentence. In this next example, Tobias geht gern wandern. The verb wandern, hiking, completes the idea of the main verb. Tobias likes to go to do what? Hiking. In my last example here, I have a separable prefix verb. The prefix separates and goes to the end. Wir laden unsere Freunde morgen Abend ein. Now, let's add to the rules we just reviewed. I'm going to explain the word order in dependent clauses. But first, what are dependent clauses? Here are a few important characteristics of a dependent clause. A dependent clause does not express a complete thought, so it is not a sentence. This means that if you take it alone without the main clause, it will not make sense, because the meaning of it really depends on what is expressed in the main clause. Like all clauses, a dependent clause has a subject and verb, and it often begins with a subordinating conjunction. Here's an example for you. A sentence that consists of two clauses. I'm going home because my friend is waiting for me. The main clause here is I'm going home because it expresses the main idea in the sentence. The other clause, because my friend is waiting for me, is a dependent clause because it begins with a subordinating conjunction and completes the idea expressed by the main clause. We are going to cover two subordinating conjunctions of German, wenn and weil. Wenn means when or if, and weil means because. Ich bleibe im Bett, wenn ich krank bin. I stay in bed when I'm sick. Ich bleibe im Bett, weil ich krank bin. I stay in bed because I'm sick. In both sentences, the second clause is our dependent clause, as they start with a subordinating conjunction and do not express a complete idea on their own. Finally, here is the new rule for you. The verb in a dependent clause occurs at the end of the clause. If you were to say, I am tired today, you would say, ich bin heute müde. However, if you wanted to make it a dependent clause and say something like, because I'm tired today, you would use the conjunction weil, which would push the verb bin to the end of the clause, leaving the remaining items unchanged. Now you have a dependent clause, weil ich heute müde bin. So if that's your reason for not going to the movies tonight, you would say, ich gehe heute Abend nicht ins Kino. Main clause, weil ich heute müde bin. Now, the fun way to remember this is to pretend you are playing soccer. Imagine that your subordinate conjunction is your favorite soccer player, and the ball is the main verb. As soon as a conjunction is used in a sentence, it kicks the verb to the end of the soccer field, which is your clause. Let's practice. Remember, As soon as you see a soccer player, you need to kick that verb. Let's go. I don't swim because I'm afraid of water. Your main clause is Ich schwimme nicht. Your idea in the dependent clause is Ich habe Angst vor Wasser, which is introduced by the conjunction weil, because. Remember the soccer player. Move the verb from the second position to the end. Your finished sentence is Ich schwimme nicht, weil ich Angst vor Wasser habe. One more sentence. We like watching TV whenever we don't have homework. As you remember, to watch TV is a separable prefix verb in German, Fernsehen. So your main sentence should be Wir sehen gern fern. And the elements of the dependent clause will be Wir haben keine Hausaufgaben. The conjunction is whenever, and it's wenn in German. Kick the verb again, and your sentence is Wir sehen gern fern, wenn wir keine Hausaufgaben haben. Your next sentence is She learns German because she's flying to Germany. I will give you a second to think about it. What is the main clause? What's the conjunction? What's the dependent clause? What gets kicked? She learns German because she's flying to Germany. Ready? Let's check. Sie lernt Deutsch, weil sie nach Deutschland fliegt. But what if you have a separable prefix verb or another verb that's already at the end of a sentence? Nothing. Keep following the rules. Kick the verb even after all other elements. See for yourself. I'm always tired because I get up early. You remember that to get up is a separable prefix verb in German. Aufstehen. So usually you would say Ich stehe früh auf. In our example, however, the separable prefix verb occurs in the dependent clause, so you need to kick that verb from its second position all the way to the end. As soon as the verb is there after the prefix, they recognize each other, like, hey, we've met, and they reconnect and become one word again. How cool is that? What do you have in the end? Ich bin immer müde, weil ich früh aufstehe. Let's try one more. We have a lot of fun when we go out together. Wir haben viel Spaß. Wir gehen zusammen aus. What's the conjunction? Wenn. And kick the verb again. It moves and joins the prefix at the end of the sentence. Wir haben viel Spaß, wenn wir zusammen ausgehen. And one more. Sie lernt Deutsch. Sie möchte gut Deutsch sprechen. She learns German because she wants to speak German well. Sie lernt Deutsch, weil sie gut Deutsch sprechen möchte. One last detail we need to consider. What if you want to start your sentence with a dependent clause? In fact, this happens very often. Look, I stay home when I'm sick. And you can also say, when I'm sick, I stay home, right? It would be great if we could do the same thing in German. Ich bleibe zu Hause, wenn ich krank bin. And wenn ich krank bin, ich bleibe zu Hause. Yes, it would be great and easy, but it wouldn't be German. Do you still remember our first word order rule? In a German statement, verb goes second. In a complete sentence here, the dependent clause, wenn ich krank bin, occupies first position. So the verb, from the main clause has to go second, and all other elements will follow. It's very unusual, but you know that Germans follow their rules, so keep the main verb second. Wenn ich krank bin, bleibe ich zu Hause. That was a lot of information, guys. Let's see what we have learned. Tell me, what's a dependent clause? A dependent clause is a clause that starts with a subordinate conjunction, and we only had two so far, weil and wenn. Okay, next question. Where is the conjugated verb in a dependent clause? Remember the soccer player? In a dependent clause, the conjugated verb goes last. What if you have a separable prefix or another verb that's already at the end? Nothing. Move your verb after them so that your separable prefix or the verb precedes the conjugated verb. What happens if I start a sentence with a dependent clause? The conjugated verb of the main clause goes right after the dependent clause, which occupies the first position of the bigger sentence. Now, let's practice. How do you say, I am hungry? Ich habe Hunger. And let's make it a dependent clause. When I'm hungry. Can you do it? Wenn ich Hunger habe. And now say, when I'm hungry, I go to a restaurant. Keep in mind that your dependent clause is in the first position, so the main verb needs to appear right after it. Wenn ich Hunger habe, gehe ich ins Restaurant. Now, how do you say, Inge is sad? Inge ist traurig. And because she is sad? Weil sie traurig ist. And finally say, Inge is listening to music because she's sad. Inge hört Musik, weil sie traurig ist. And the last one. We are bored. Wir haben Langeweile. Change it to because we are bored. Weil wir Langeweile haben. And now say, because we are bored, we're inviting friends over. How do you say to invite? Einladen, a separable prefix verb. Try it. I'm waiting. Let's see if you got it right. Weil wir Langeweile haben, laden wir Freunde ein. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you understood the topic well. Let me know if you have any questions. Remember to kick that verb.